We are happy that you're here tonight. We're going to do a little war tonight, a little additional war from what we had Sunday. But let's back up to Sunday and get just a little bit of insight into what's going on. We're talking about Gideon, the judge. And he had war with a group of people. Anybody remember what group it was? Over here in number 3, y'all remember what group it was? Midianite. Very good. All right. And so they were having this war where, number 2? Not you. You can't answer. Number 2, where was this war? Where did it start? I'm seeing how good a job you did, Jimmy. Sukkoth? No, that's not where it started now. This one started back up somewhere else. Where did it start? Number 1, where did that war start? Come on now. We need some help here. You remember Gideon had his men. How many of them was it? 300. He had 300 men, and they were kind of surrounding. You remember where they were at? Randall, you remember where they were? Where that started? Okay. That was in the Jezreel Valley. And they followed down the Jezreel Valley, and after what did Gideon have his men to do? Number 2, what did he have men to do? What did he have those men to do? Do what he did, and he did what? Broke a pitcher, shouted, and broke the pitcher, that's right, and shouted, the sword of the Lord and Gideon. And then all these people came running after him, right? No. They didn't run after them. They started fighting one another. Yeah, they started fighting one another. You think about it, if you're out somewhere and it's pitch black, do you know what you are doing sometimes or where you're even going? Sometimes it's hard to find you. I mean, all of them didn't have a LED flashlight with them, you know. They didn't have those things. They didn't have a candle. And they started fighting one another, and then they started running. I can't tell you how they knew which way to go, but they did. But they ran away, and Gideon ran after them. And he sent word to one of the tribes, and he says, you go to the fords, and you kill all of them that try to cross. What was the name of that tribe? Number 3, what was the name of that tribe? What? Well, it wasn't Benjamin, sorry. Ephraim, very good. Ephraim, very good, thank you. Ephraim was the one who was told to go to the fords of the river. Well, the Midianites went to the Jordan, and they went down, and they were getting ready to cross. And during the process, they killed 2 men who were high up, you might say, in the Midianites. They were kind of, you might say, sergeants or whatever. You remember what those names were? Oreb and Zeb. Very good. Oreb and Zeb. And so they proceeded to go on across, the ones who were able to get by, and they went on across the Jordan River. And Gideon was still in the process of chasing them, you might say. And so Gideon kills the Midianite leaders. That's kind of he doesn't get them right now. He's going to chase them for a while. Gideon and his men came to the Jordan. They were exhausted, but they came to Succoth, a little city there, and Gideon asked for food. He and his men had been chasing these Midianites, and they were tired and they were hungry. He would just give out. And so he asked for some food and told them that they were in pursuit of Zebah and Zalmunna. These were the kings of Midian. King and Midian and one other was with them. Amorite? Amalekites or Amorites, one or the other. And the children of these, there you go. But anyway, we find that the leaders of Succoth asked Gideon a question. Have you got these people, in hand? Have you already caught them? And Gideon said, no, we're chasing them, basically. And they were afraid that if they did not didn't have them, that they would get away and they'd come back and come against them and, you might say, destroy their city. And so we find that I've got a better one, I think. Yeah, there's Succoth, and it's also another city there that's called Peniel, and Karkar. Let me move back. Karkar is the place where the Zebah and Zalmunna were headed with their army. They were going to get away from Gideon and make their way to Karkar. By the way, this is the track up in the Jezreel Valley, and they came down to about the ford there at the Jabbok River. Do you remember the names of all of these rivers? What was the one at the bottom? That's easy. What? No. What letter is last in the alphabet? Z-red. There you go. What's the next one up? The letter in the top of the alphabet. Arnon. And then you have the Jabbok, because it looks kind of like a J. And the next one is a what? Yarmuk. Very good. It looks kind of like a Y. And you can kind of see that. There's the Yarmuk. It looks kind of like a Y right there. And the Jabbok comes out right along in here. I'm sorry. And it looks kind of like a J. That'll kind of help you to learn those rivers. Those come into play quite often as these different judges are taking place and ruling over Israel. So Gideon told them, since you give us no food, okay, when the Lord delivers these Zebah and Zalmunna into our hands, then we're going to come back and we're going to thresh your hide with thorns. I don't know about you, but I've had my share of thrashings, but it wasn't with thorns. How many have had thrashings? Come on, don't be ashamed of it. If you had good parents, they thrashed you. Okay. Should have had more, probably. At least I did. But anyway, the Lord saved me from all that. And but anyway, my dad did a good job when he started thrashing. I can tell you that. Anyway, Gideon goes on. He goes on to the next city. He comes to Peniel, and he asks that city for food. And they kind of had the same idea as the Succoth did. And so Gideon said to them, he says, well, when I catch them and I come back to you, let me tell you, I'm going to come in and I'm going to break down this tower. And he goes on even further when that happens. But Zebah and Zalmunna were in Karkar, and that was anywhere from 80 to 100 miles to the east, and I showed you that a while ago. And that was east of the Jordan River. And so by this time, the Midianites only had about 15,000 men left. You think, well, that's a lot of men. Well, how many did Gideon have? 300. Good. Very good. And now they've already dwindled down. Of course, Ephraim helped, and others had helped too. But now they've only got like 15,000 people left. And Gideon used the roads of the nomads, more or less, to find Zebah and Zalmunna. And he captured them. He destroyed the rest of the army. And Gideon returns back to Penuel and Succoth. Oh boy, here we go, folks. And he had not forgotten that they did not help him when he needed food. So Gideon shows them, look who I've caught. I've caught Zebah and Zalmunna, and here they are. And you know what I'm fixing to do to you? And so Gideon destroys the tower at Penuel, and he also slew the men of the city besides that. And he went on to Succoth. He took thorns and briars and did as he said. He thrashed their hide. And we don't know exactly how he did that. Some suggest that he may have tied a rope to them and drug them through a briar patch. That wouldn't be any better than being thrashed with it, would it? It would be bad either way. But that was what Gideon did to let them folks know, hey, when the Lord asks for something, and you need to step up to the plate. We are not sure exactly how that all happened, but the problem with these cities was they did not believe Gideon could win the battle. So Gideon turns to Zebah and Zalmunna, and he asks them, what were the men like that you killed at Mount Tabor? What were those men like? And the answer was, from Zebah and Zalmunna, they were kind of like you. They were kind of like you, the sons of a king, offspring of a king. Gideon went on to tell them, he said, those were my brothers. Now, if you had not killed them, I might have saved your life right now. But he told his son, who was younger, must have been pretty young, evidently. I don't know exactly how young, but he was so young that he refused to hurt them. This is Mount Tabor, you remember. You remember the Jezreel Valley goes right down through here and goes down towards the Jordan. But anyway, Gideon's son was afraid that to kill them, being just a young man. And Zebah and Zalmunna said, well, you kill us yourself. You're a man. You do it. And so Gideon took them at their word, and he slew both of them. And he took the crescents that hung around the necks of their camels as spoils of war. And that's what we talked about earlier, that a lot of times that they would put like gold or real expensive things on their animals or whatever when they went into battle. And they would take a lot of their good possessions with them. But the fight of the Midianites started in the Jezreel Valley and down the Jordan to the Jabbok River. They crossed, continued eastward until they thought they were safe from Gideon. And the tribe of Ephraim had hurried to the fords. They captured as many as they could. And Gideon went on to Succoth and Penuel and on to Karkar and caught the Zebah and Zalmunna. Gideon was asked to become ruler of Israel. They wanted him to be the king. And Gideon said, no, I will not, and neither will my sons be king over you. So the Lord is your ruler. Have we heard something like that before this? That he would be their, that God would be their God, and they would be his people. You know, we've heard that before, and that's what Gideon is telling them. He said, the Lord is the ruler over you. It's not me. But he did say, I'll make one request. After leading them into war and winning and all that, he said, would you give me the gold earrings that you took for loot? How many men was it that was in that battle from the Midianites? And they got them later. So roughly 130 to 135,000 people with, I don't know how many of them had earrings, but if you take just half that amount, it come to a pretty good chunk of gold, wouldn't it, or whatever it might be. And there was much gold because these folks were a form of the Ishmaelites, or maybe even a descendant of them. But they were desert dwellers. You remember somebody who got taken by the Ishmaelites way back? Sold into Egypt even. Joseph, yeah, I knew I'd get enough answers out there. You can kind of pick up on it. Joseph, he was sold by the Ishmaelites, and they did trading and those kind of things. So you could see these people would have some wealth with them. You know, the warriors usually took all of their wealth, or a big part of it, and many times they would decorate their camels or donkeys or chariots or whatever it might be with these expensive things. The men were glad to give Gideon this gold earrings. And so he spread out a cloth, and they came, and each one of them, they take these and pitch them in the sheet, and it turned out to be 1,700 shekels. That's about 50 pounds of gold. I'm not going to even fathom what it would bring today's market. It would be a pretty good chunk, wouldn't it? But anyway, Gideon took the gold and he made an ephod, and put it in the city of Ophrah. Israel began to worship the ephod as a god and used it in worship. Now, you remember what an ephod was? We talked about this last quarter. That's an ephod right there that's worn on the priest. Now, that's what Gideon made and decorated it with this gold. Now, what all else was involved in it, I don't know, and I don't know where they actually put it, if they had it on an idol or what it might have been. I don't know for sure. But we know that he made that, and they started worshiping it. It's basically front and back, flap. What was behind the ephod? Number one, remember what was behind the ephod on the priest? What was behind the ephod, the breastplate, basically? What was behind that? Urim and Thummim. Very good. Thank you. Urim and Thummim is where the priest kept that. You say anything about these having one there. Now, there had been, well, let me go back. There had been some type of idol the ephod was placed on, possibly, and this worship could have been at the altar that Gideon built that we learned about in the 6th chapter in verse 24. Israel went whoring after gods, idols, and those kind of things. And it became a snare to Gideon and to his family. Israel had quietness for 40 years after this. Gideon had 70 sons and many wives. He had a concubine in Shechem. What was the two mountains either side of Shechem? Number one. Can number two tell me? I want you, Jimmy. Ebal and Gerizim. Very good. All right. Ebal and Gerizim. That's on either side of Shechem. And we're going to get to that in just a minute. But he had a concubine from Shechem, and bore a son, and his name was Abimelech. Now, Abimelech is listed with the judges. He never actually judged Israel. Okay? And he was not put there or placed there by God. Gideon died at a good old age, and after his death, Israel turned to Baal. Israel turned from Jehovah, who delivered them from their enemies. This story is unusual, but Abimelech is never called as a judge. He was a very unscrupulous ambitious man. He was determined he was going to be king over Israel. And he had the men of Shechem decide if he would be the king or not. So Abimelech was Gideon's son by the concubine. He went to Shechem, and he asked his brothers. You remember, his mother was from Shechem. So he considered all the men of Shechem as his brothers, more or less, because they were kin. And he said to them, he said, had you rather your brother to rule over you or the 70 sons of Gideon? Which he was one of them, of course. But remember, I'm part of your flesh, remember? You know, I'm part of you. And so we don't have any indication that any of his brothers even desired to be ruler over Israel. But anyway, his relatives there kind of responded favorably. Since he's our kin, the Shechemites gave Abimelech 70 pieces of silver. That's kind of what he was needing or wanting. And he used it, and he hired some evil men. I mean, they were as unscrupulous as he was, more or less. And he took them to Ophrah, where all of Gideon's other sons were, and he killed them all in one place. The youngest son, Jotham, was able to escape by hiding and did not get killed. We're not sure that the men of Shechem knew exactly what Abimelech was going to do, or what he was going to do with the money that they had given him. But after this, Shechem and the house of Milo made Abimelech king by the oath of the monument that was in Shechem. And this all happened near the city that God promised Abraham's descendants back in Genesis, the 12th chapter. And this is the city, if you remember, where Abraham actually came to at the beginning, when he came to the land of Canaan. Jotham stood on Mount Gerizim. That was one of the mountains. And he shouted out, listen to me, Shechem. He wanted the men to hear. He said, the trees of the forest went out to choose a king over them. They went to an olive tree and said, olive tree, rule over us. And the olive tree said, should I leave my fatness by which people give honor to God, go wave back and forth over the trees? Well, you see the difference in a forest and a little olive tree? I mean, it's a pretty good sized tree, all right. But you think about an olive tree ruling over a whole forest. And that's just utterly, you don't even think that it could happen, you know. Well, it goes on to say, and by the way, there's Gerizim and Ebal and Shechem in the middle, and he was standing on one side or the other and hollered down to the men of Shechem. And then he goes on to say, the tree then, this forest, they went and to a fig tree and said, fig tree, rule over us. Now, fig tree is not all that big. I don't know how many of you have a fig tree in your yard, but I think about 10 to 15 feet high is about as big as they grow. And so they wanted a fig tree to rule over this whole big forest. And he also went to a vine, and we'll look at that in just a second. But the vine refused as well. The vine said, how can I leave my wine, which cheers God and man, and wave back and forth over the trees? So you have a forest, you have a fig tree. You see, it's not very big compared to a big forest. And the same thing with grapevines, where you would make wine with. It's utterly crazy to think that this could even happen. And last of all, the trees come to a briar. I mean, you're getting down to the nitty gritty when you come to a briar patch, you know, wanting that to rule over a forest. And you see how ridiculous this is sounding, but the trees come and rule over us. And what he's doing, he's comparing Abimelech to, you know, the people of Israel, basically. And he said, if you choose to be your king, if you choose me to be your king, then come and stand under the shade from the heat. Have you ever thought about standing under the shade of a briar patch? You know, now a rabbit, they'd be tickled to go under a briar patch. But if not, let the fire come out from thorn bush and devour the cedar of Lebanon. Now, I got this. This is the forest, and this is kind of a briar patch. And look how much shade there is. And this is a pretty good sized briar patch. But you can see that only a few people could even stand in the shade at all. But you men of Shechem have dealt, if you have dealt uprightly and fairly in making Abimelech king and dealt rightly with my family, that's what Gideon is saying to these people. Remember, my father fought for you. He put his life on the line and delivered you from Midian. And you have risen up against him and his family. You've executed his sons and made Abimelech king over Shechem because he is your relative. If you, Abimelech was prince over Israel for 3 years. The Israelites involved were those tribes who lived in or near Shechem. Tribes near Shechem. Can you think of what tribes might be close to Shechem? That's a real test, Jimmy. What tribes would be, let's put it, what tribe would be just south of Shechem? Remember what tribe he called to come help? Ephraim. Okay, good. All right, and just to the north, it would have been Zebulun. Good. All right, and what other one? Manasseh. Okay, Manasseh, maybe Naphtali. Those are some of the ones that would be right in that particular area. Asher was a little further up, I believe. And but those are the ones who were close by there. God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the children there that lived at Shechem. And Shechem began to not honor the agreement they had made with him. And they were basically paying tribute to him. And so they started robbing people who come through to be able to, probably to pay him. And Gaal, or Gaal, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, the son of Ebed, along with his men, came to Shechem. And Shechem welcomed him, thinking that he would save them, more or less, from Abimelech. They had a big party, and much wine was consumed. And during this time, during this party, Gaal kind of, I don't know if he was a little out of his kilter or not from the wine or what it might be, but he challenged Abimelech to come and fight, you know. And you find that a lot of times with people who overindulge, if you want to put it that, in wine and so forth. But Zebul, a man there, heard him make this statement. And so he sent word to Abimelech about the religion or the rebellion of Gaal and Shechem and what all was taking place. And so he tells Abimelech to come and that by night and hide in the fields and attack the city in the morning. And so he and his men, when Gaal and his men come against you, you can then take care of them. Abimelech gathers his men. He set out by night. The next morning, Gaal went out from standing in the city, and he looked, and Abimelech's men started moving down the mountain. I don't know if they were on both mountains or not, for the Ebal and Gerizim, if they were on both of them or just one of them. But anyway, Gaal said, you know, look, are people coming down the mountain? You know, if you think about it, it was kind of covered in trees, but there were some open places too. And you just don't normally see trees be moving, right? And so it looked like people coming down. And this, you know, it's got trees on there, and you could kind of see how he might could think, or somebody persuade him that, you know, it's just the shadows, you know. And that's what Zebul told him. He said, that's just the shadows of the mountaintop. What do you mean you think it's men coming down? Well, he looked, and there come some from the highest point, and others the way of the oak and of the soothsayer. And Zebul said to Gael, where's your bragging rights now? Say it again, what you said about Abimelech. You know, why don't you go out and fight, like you said you was going to do? And so Gael gathered his men and to fight and went to meet Abimelech. Abimelech ran Gael and his men back to the city, and many fell wounded that day. And Abimelech took Arumah for his headquarters, and Zebul drove Gael and his men from Shechem. The men of Shechem went to the fields the next day, and Abimelech set an ambush. He took the city, he tore down the city and sowed it in salt. What would happen if you sow a city in salt? Nothing's going to grow. Nothing will grow. Others in Shechem heard what had happened, and they went into a stronghold. Abimelech was told where they went, so he went and he cut a bough down, or a big long stick, and put it on his shoulder and told his men, he said, you do the same. And so they all did that. They piled the branches around the stronghold, they burned it, and 1,000 men and women died there. Thebes must have been a city somewhere close by there, and they had kind of the same mindset evidently as Shechem did. And Abimelech laid siege to that city as well. They had a strong tower, and those towers back in those days, they were pretty good size and built out of rock generally, big round things. And you think about the city of Shechem had a tower that was tall enough, like 1,000 men and women were in. And this city here had a strong tower as well. Evidently, it was pretty tall. And Abimelech was going to burn it also. And so as he approached it and got close to it, there was a woman that was up on the tower, and she dropped a upper millstone. You know what an upper millstone is? Anybody seen an old grist mill? Now, I'm not sure that she could picked up one of them great old big wheels, but she could have had a chunk off of one of them that was broken or something. And she took that and dropped it. Guess who it hit? Abimelech. Got him right where it almost killed him. And what happened was he was afraid he was going to die. And so he had his assistant, or his armor bearer, they called it back then, you stab me and kill me so I won't be killed by a woman. Somebody else was killed by a woman. What was his name? Sisera. Good. All right. Very good. I don't know that this woman got the credit, that one that killed Sisera. All right. When Israel saw that Abimelech was dead, they returned home, and God rendered judgment against Shechem, and the curse of Jotham came upon them. And that was that they would no longer, you might say, be a city of any kind, more or less. All right. I think I got through just a few minutes early. As we think about the judges, the first one was Othniel. The second, Ehud, Shamgar, Deborah, Gideon. Next one, Abimelech. He wasn't a judge. I got you on that. Now, he is considered named with the judges, even though he did not actually judge. And you can see why God would not have chosen him, because he was such an evil man, evil character. that he wanted to be number one. He wanted to rule over Israel. He wanted to be king, and that did not happen, of course. All right, let's go through all of the judges. Othniel, Ehud, Shamgar, Deborah, Gideon, Abimelech, Tola, Jair, Jephthah, Samuel. Okay. Kind of weak on that. Work on them. Try to keep them in mind. If you ever get those in your mind, that would be good. It'll help you out in your studies. All right. We have finished just a few minutes early. Anybody got a question that I can answer or Jimmy can answer? We would be glad to do it. We get the next three on Sunday, next three judges. All right. And that would be Tola, Jair, and Jephthah. Okay, very good. All right. Thank y'all for your participation tonight. We're just about out of time. We'll take just a minute or two and time to go. Thank y'all.
They went from red, stay over there and hit the